All right, folks, thank you all for being here. It's just after 7. I think we'll probably see a lot more people trickling in. But I'd like to get started a little bit. We're going to go back to your conversations at tables, so don't worry about that. We're going to get right back to it. As the first exercise, I've got some little pieces of paper on your table and some pens. If you don't have enough pens, I have more, let me know. But the first thing that I would like you to do is grab one of those pieces of paper, and I would like you to write on that piece of paper 3 things that you think are either very important to keep or need to be built on, added to, grown in the hamlet. So you're going to do 3 things that you think are important, very important to keep and protect or be added to the hamlet, to this hamlet.
David?
Yes.
Kristen just interrupted me, so I didn't hear the last 3 things. Also, can you introduce yourself? There's some people in here who might not know.
Oh, I absolutely will. So this is just a getting started activity, and there's actually going to be 2 parts to it. But to introduce myself to all of you, my name is David West. I'm the town planner. I've been working with Danby for 2.5-ish years, maybe, something around there. I live in Ithaca. I've lived here in this community since 2009. I raised my children here. When I moved here, one of them was nursing and is now in high school. They're almost fully baked. So that means they move out and go away soon, right, Crystal? Yeah, so my children are fully Tompkins County, New York, Ithacans. I grew up in Central California and have lived all up and down the West Coast and have been here. I have a master's in urban planning from Cornell University, worked a bunch of different jobs. I've been a downtown store owner. I've been a consultant for a multinational consulting firm. I've been a consultant for my own 2-person local firm. I've led a group of student planners, architects, and designers. And I was also the housing planner for Tompkins County before coming to Danby. So I worked on a whole bunch of different stuff. What we're doing tonight, the end goal, the big piece of information, there's 2 things that I'm trying to get at. One of them is we have $10,000 from Tompkins County to pay a wonderful grant writing firm to help us pursue bigger pots of money. So last year, we got $5,000 from Tompkins County. We worked with a grant writer to win $500,000 in funding for fixing up homes for low-income homeowners. That work is about to start. I thought that this year, and that was done kind of quickly, and there wasn't a conversation about it. It was obviously, we have a report that says we have hundreds of substandard homes. A lot of people live in them, cannot afford to fix them. That was an easy thing to say, yeah, we should definitely do that. We could do more of that, or we could do other stuff. The grant from the county is for getting funding that will help housing affordability and accessible housing. We need more ideas about how we do that, but we can also do other things. So the second thing that I want to come out of this is more of a shared sense of purpose, responsibility, goals, and ultimately a group of people, a cohort, which may not be every single person here, but maybe some people that can crystallize out of this group, who want to keep working on things, who want to do stuff. This is about doing. So you're all starting with writing down 3 things that you would either find very important to keep or like to have added or improved in the hamlet. That's the first part. The other part on the back is 5 things that you're willing to do about those 3 things.
Can you write down things we like to do?
Sure. So I'm going to leave you for 5 more minutes to kind of think about that, and then we're going to share with the people at our tables. But I want to make clear that that's an important part. We're a very small town. I am a staff of 1, so we could come up with things all day that I should do. And I can tell you right now, I'm probably not going to be able to do them. But if we, as a community, decide there's things we want done, we have to be ready to do them together. And so that's a chance for us to be a part of the things that we want to see in the community.
David, this is not specific for the hamlet, it's for overall now, for Danby as an overall.
I think it makes most sense if it's specific to the hamlet, but we're a community. If you got ideas that are not super specific to the hamlet, I'm not going to rein in your creativity. Oh, sure. Got it. Hello, welcome. I'm David. There are refreshments here. There are community members everywhere, and there are tables in the club, or not tables, chairs in the closet right there. Oh, you got one in there. And your neighbors there can fill you in on our first guest.
David, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I wasn't clear from your presentation what your background is planning for hamlets that have been established for more than decades.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to talk about that when people get going a little bit. Ooh, I don't. I've got one of your neighbors. On the wall.
Thermostat, the right, the.
Yeah, I
All right, if folks have gotten down the 3 things that they think are important and 5 things that they're willing to do, you can share that with the people at your table. And I want to hear back from each table at least 3 interesting things that people think are important and 5 interesting things that people want to do. Out of all the 4 or 5 or 6, we only have 4 or 5 at each table. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to share with each other, and then we'll come back and share around the room.
What am I looking for? I could encourage more people to do it. I feel like it's
That's actually one of the things that I like to
Regularly. I yeah, like a bucket sandwich. It's not terrible. Yeah, I'm almost scanner. The more and like, you know,
One half minute left.
to make that more. The building.
All right, folks, I know you're having really wonderful conversations with fellow Danbyites. I'd like to come back together for a minute so that we can share and benefit from the communal knowledge that we've come up with and ideas and focus. So maybe we can go around the room. Here's what I think we'll do. I'll point to a table and we'll start with the things that, the first side of the paper, the things that are important, need to be kept, need to be improved. I'm gonna do one per table when I point at you. We'll probably go around a couple times. I don't want to spend all night on this, but this, and then we'll talk about this, an interesting thing at each table that somebody said they were ready to actually do something about. So why don't we start with, sorry, Colleen, you just put something in your mouth, but we'll start with your table. What was one thing that you thought was important to keep or improve?
We'd like to keep community meetings, we like gathering, things like this. Already have a key.
We have more improves than keeps.
Yeah, we have more improvements, we can go over that.
Why don't you do one improve and we'll go to the next table.
Okay, which one should we say?
They're all valid.
Well, we like communities, we would that more places for the community to gather, so like a local business, shop, or something like Lipton's Market, and just discuss.
Awesome. How about the table in the very back?
Cleaning up vacant properties.
Okay. This table.
Walkability, rollability.
Awesome. How about you guys?
Encouraging like a small village commercial center, just a couple of businesses.
Great. This front table?
Create a median down the middle of 96 feet with trees, slow traffic and create more.
Cool. And middle table?
We were so busy just chatting, we didn't really, did you have something you wanted to add to say? Right.
Can you repeat that?
So it's also like a village center, a nucleus or business commercial area where people can meet and have a little bit more business going.
Great. Does any table have, instead of going around to everyone again, does any table have another thing that you feel is important to keep or improve that you really want to share with the group before we move to what people do? Colleen?
I would like to see more housing.
More housing.
Or have some trees and greenery on the road.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need incentives for the affordable housing. We can't really do affordable housing in this area without incentives.
Amen. Ted?
A number of us at the table came up with variants on open space, environment, natural, water.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just add to that, and I didn't say it before, that to minimize the infill, which would produce that.
We're in the hamlet or out in the countryside?
We're talking Hamlet.
Yeah, okay.
What was the last part?
Ted doesn't want to infill in the hamlet,
You do or you don't?
does not.
Want to have house, or business. Open space,
In the hamlet,
which we have.
which we have.
Catherine,
I would like to see a network of pathways, and I'm willing to help with it.
cool. Perfect transition. So let's go around to each table, and each table tell me 2 interesting things that someone at your table said they were willing to actually do something about. And we'll start at Nancy's table.
I have like a subcommittee developed to identify properties for housing. You know, see if people are willing to sell or
Cool.
get some kind of, grant for that.
So who was ready to do that? Raise your hand. That was you? Awesome. Do you want to, let me get some of these pens out, and we have a poster right there. What are you ready to do? I love it, Nancy. You're on the spot. How about this table? Just what you said, housing location committee, chaired by Danby HamletMtg.
No, I'm not saying.
Olivia, how about your table?
Well, I can
I know
only
you're a doer.
I can only speak for myself, but one is, I am going to be making a fairly substantial financial investment into the Market Cafe on my property, and my property is also available for further investment, housing, commerce, whatever.
Awesome. Anybody else at the table have an idea of something they're ready to do?
Meetings, having meetings. Actually, Don's with Shimon now, so
Awesome.
this is.
Very cool. Yeah, making connections. Awesome. How about this table here?
Drew and I are both residents of White Hawk Village, and one of our other neighbors, Karthik, is working with Olivia to develop a market, Danby Market, and all of us at White Hawk are very committed to helping that
Awesome.
market.
Yeah. Nancy, how about write that down? Danby Market. Support Danby Market. How about this table here?
Develop the Danby Market.
Yeah.
I met Kartik once, and I am willing to organize like farmers in Danby, so then we could have local produce in the market.
Yeah. That's awesome.
What's your name?
I'm Sam.
Sam?
Yes.
Anything, is there another thing at this table that someone said they're really ready to do?
Like a local farmer's market,
We're talking a lot about ideas, less
like
about.
a Danby farmer's market, is that what you're talking about?
Not a farmer's market, like just like.
Connecting farmers to the market that is coming.
Yeah.
We do also have a summer Danby Farmers Market that will be starting up soon at Dodson Park.
Okay, so what do you want me to do?
Connect farmers to Danby Market. All right. Did we do you guys already? No. What's something interesting that someone at this table was willing to do?
We wanted to reduce it from 5 things to 1.
Does that come to this
We
meeting?
didn't really talk about that.
Okay.
And it's not a Hamlet thing, but I live with a steam mill, and between me and 3 or 4 other neighbors, talk about putting a conservation easement on all our property, which could protect the whole Steam Mill Creek.
All right. Nancy, we got one more, which is put an easement on open space property, and that's outside of the hamlet. I'm glad that everyone at this table is ready to do that. Is that what I hear? Yeah. So I think we are already successful. So we can all be glad that we met some people that we didn't know, hopefully, and come up with some ideas and have some stuff ready for action. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the hamlets, because you may have noticed we didn't talk about what a hamlet is. or where it is. And I saw people starting to look at this map saying, where is it? Am I in it? Am I out of it? One thing that I think is interesting in New York State, there is this thing called a hamlet. We have towns, cities, villages, and we have hamlets. And the funny thing about hamlets is they're places that have a center, but they don't have an edge. There is no definition of what a hamlet is. It's a place that there is definitely a sense of it's a place. And does it end? Where does it start? It's not, there's no legal boundary. In Danby, we decided as a community that our two hamlets, Central Danby and West Danby, the historic centers, most dense parts of the community, were the places where, as we continue to grow, we wanted to focus that development. And so about a year and a half ago, the town adopted zoning that made it easier to build in the two hamlets and harder to build in the rural parts of the town. And it's a two-pronged approach. Like we heard people say today, we're working hard on conservation of places that should be conserved, and we're also designating the hamlets as a place that makes sense to be developed. So we put in a bunch of things that make it harder to just evenly spread development over the whole town. That's really not what we want. It's very hard to serve with services, with bus. It creates a lot of environmental damage. And so concentrating that in an area that has okay bus service, really good bus service for a rural place. And I know people will complain about it, but I gotta tell you, it's award-winning, amazing service for a place as not dense as we are. And also an ability to catalytically create a place that has more than just the sum of its parts. What's interesting about Central Danby, which is up on the map here, we make two zones in the hamlet. So there are edges. John?
Help everyone.
Yeah.
What part is the hamlet?
Yeah. So the hamlet is yellow and orange, and this is 96B. It goes from just south of Michigan Hollow Road. So Michigan Hollow, Bald Hill, Gunderman. It goes up just a little bit past East and West Miller, which I need to change I'm being very power efficient in shutting down quickly. So East and West Miller is up there. So we go a few parcels beyond that. What's interesting is that historically this is actually kind of 3 hamlets or 2.5 hamlets. There was really a strong center here, which is the densest, most historic part where some of the oldest homes that are close together are, and the church and the town hall. Things that we used to have there also include a hotel, a tavern, multiple cobblers, a bunch of carriage makers, several dry goods stores, a couple of grocery stores. You can get everything you needed for daily life in Danby 120 years ago. And then what happened? We got cars, and it became a lot easier to go to a large place where you can get stuff at cheaper prices, and we lost most of our commercial assets. But there's a lot of work going on to bring some of that back. And in the hamlet, we've kind of combined it as one. We worked off of half-mile and quarter-mile radiuses for how far out you go while still being in the hamlet, which is a long walk. A half-mile walk from the edge to the center is long, but it is an area that's big enough that we can kind of think of it as a place. So the light yellow is our zone called Hamlet Neighborhood, and the orange is our zone called Hamlet Center. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. The center's in the center. The neighborhood is the neighborhood around it. The center is where we have allowed more commercial uses as well as residential. Both zones make residential, small-scale residential development very easy. In the orange zone, not only is residential development allowed by right, so is small-scale commercial, and you can have larger residential and commercial development by site plan review with the planning board. I'll note that when we first did this, there were a lot of people who said, oh my gosh, that center is so small. How could we possibly have the commercial that we need in that tiny center. It's not enough land. And then we made some maps. They compared this to other places. And this orange section right here is about as long as half the commons in downtown Ithaca. It's about as long as most of Main Street in Trumansburg. It's about the same as all of Main Street in Groton. So there is room there to do stuff, but we do have challenges. Before we move to our next step, I forgot. We have some things around the board, and one of them is right here, which is the complaint parking lot. And I have a whole bunch of sticky notes here. And this is the place, if at any point in this conversation you feel like there is something that the town is not doing, that somebody else is doing wrong, something that you don't like, that you aren't actually willing to do anything about, you can write it down and put it on there. And we're not going to talk about it, but we're going to collect the list. And if you feel like you got to get something out, that's a place for it right there. And it's open to all, no judgment, but it's a way to do that, because I found sometimes people have something burning inside them they need to get out and share. And I want to create a place for that, but I also want us to be able to work together and be productive. So that's not the way our group conversation is going to go. But if you got beef, that's the place for it. And you're welcome to sticky notes, and I have pens. Does anyone have questions about the hamlets generally and the vision? Yeah.
Does the fact that we now define the hamlet by default then constitute us as opposed?
Good question. So in New York State, towns, cities, and villages are municipal entities. They have a boundary and they have a government. So the hamlet does not have its own government. It's just a neighborhood in the town. Yes?
So you're showing on the map in orange, you're comparing them to the Commons, Trumansburg, et cetera. You're talking about increasing the density there and limiting the density outside.
Yes.
Commons, Trumansburg, they have public water. So everybody in that orange district is going to be drawing off the aquifer. So when you talk about concentrating, you really can't compare it to the Commons or Trumansburg because they have an exterior source of water. So
you identified a thing that makes it difficult to achieve that level of density.
Concentrate, how do you know when you've maxed out and there's no more water?
So I think what you're identifying is that as concentration happens, there is a point where you need shared infrastructure. In West Danby, we have a water district where people share a well that serves a bunch of houses, and that allows them to overcome some barriers to the traditional density that was there. So it was built without a shared well, but people got tired of having wells that had a lot of silt in them. There's a lot of quicksand. I never realized quicksand was going to be something that came into my adult life, but it exists in West Danby. And so as you grow, as we achieve this vision, we can continue to densify, but there will be a point where we do need some shared infrastructure. Drinking water is one that may come at some point. One that's a bigger barrier is wastewater because it takes up a lot of space to do wastewater. So right now the town allows as much density as the health department will permit. The health department's job is to keep development safe, to make sure that there is a reasonable amount of land for the various systems and engineering that's available today. We've been studying various options for people to share, for lots to share, septic that can be more concentrated, for there would be more advanced technology. But we are also looking at what would be the cost if we all have a really strong vision and we have a bunch of stuff that we want to fit there instead of spreading it all over. Is there a cost-efficient way that we could serve it with some shared municipally owned infrastructure that's paid by people who it serves? So excellent question. Thank you for bringing it up. Are there other questions about hamlets generally or kind of what this means? Nancy?
Well, I was just kind of thinking about climate exchange and how nice that was. Did anyone go to the plant exchange? Yeah, so it was just nice to see everybody. There was community and sharing and talking, and maybe it'd be fun to create more events in the town like that. That would be fairly simple. You know, we can have different themes or whatever. Flea market kind of ideas once more, I don't know, just to create a sense of community in the town. Like, so more people in the town can get to know each other. And create, part of having Hamlet is having people that want to come hang out with each other, that know each other in town. And I think that it doesn't have that. They don't have school, they don't have a store. You don't, you know, a lot of people that live up on this end up here don't even come through town, right? Some people on Coker Road don't come, right? So anyway, that might be something. It's kind of like, Alana's already doing that down at the park. Would it make more sense to do it more in up here?
I don't know, I think, so for folks who don't know, Nancy is talking about the something special event or Danby's Farmers Market that happens at Dobson Park and is organized by a former planning board member and lovely Danbyite named Alana. She's organized that the last 3 years and it's kind of slowly grown. I think getting more people there and showing that it's successful will help grow that interest in really this being the heart of the community, because I think people instinctually know that, but we also, I agree, we need to keep showing it. So one thing I'm interested in, by a show of hands, what people in the room live within this orange, and I'm going to count the purple. The purple here is White Hawk. It is basically within the hamlet.
So that like Andy.
Yeah, so from just south of Michigan Hollow, some of Michigan Hollow, including Bald Hill, including Gunderman just past the school, including Hornbrook, up to the highway department, and going up just past East and West Miller, out a few houses on either side there. So raise your hand if you live within that area. So we got five of us here live in the hamlet. Okay, that's worth understanding. The rest of you are here because this is the psychological and spiritual heart of the community that we all recognize. And it has that from both history and also form. And it's easy to see. And I think there's, for a long time, been broad interest from the whole town in saying this is the place that makes the most sense to continue to invest in. So for our next step, maybe we'll go back to the tables and think about, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. So we have 4 posters and 6 tables. So why don't these 4 each grab a poster, and we're going to rotate through them. We're going to take just 2 minutes. The posters, and you're going to write directly on them. You can use your little pens, or I have a bunch of washable markers. I'm trying to keep the not washable markers away in case it leads to the wall. We're going to brainstorm a few things about what is missing in the hamlet, what has the hamlet lost that it once had. If you've been here long enough to know, some of you may be new to the area. What has the hamlet gained since you've lived here or since you've been involved? And what housing barriers or limits do we have? So let's take this table, do the first one, that table, do the one that's right behind you. Why don't you guys do what has the hamlet gained? And maybe this table, do what housing barriers or limits do we have? And the other 2 tables, think about, if you have a question about what any of those mean, raise your hand and I'll come down. I really are going to keep this quick, so just throw up things, brainstorm them.
You can share it. I thought. Oh, no. Is this 4 times or good in here?
Yeah, maybe I can grab a.
Very clean. That's a very clean shirt. Okay, I don't think that's good.
I thought I couldn't do everything since I didn't give you an assignment. One of our next meeting steps is really thinking about things that we can do to improve housing. And what the barriers are. All of these going on like having access to housing. So if you want to think about that, we'll get that post Friday next. I think that's a good conversation. Yeah. Oh, you're gonna call it? Oh, I opened it because I didn't. Sorry.
There's not much of it.
So where do you live? Like on the Tree Hollow, right?
Well, I think we gained.
When you stayed outside. They all have been very expensive.
Yeah, so now we can.
Try not to. And I know the kids don't have problems. And if the house ever gets finished and their roof can be and they will see Amy, which is out there. We put that.
All right, folks, let's rotate. We're gonna play musical chairs. Yeah, why don't you take what's missing and trade it with these folks of what is in game. And why don't you take what is lost and bring it to this table here.
Oh, that's great. I can say a lot about that.
What do you think?
This is so much better than yesterday. I should have made more productive. I think that's to improve what we're ready to do. We said we're ready to drive slower, and I pay more for convenience.
It's mentioned, you know, when that.
Okay, folks, let's rotate again. You guys want to game? Okay, Jeff? This is the new one you just got. You need what, have you had what's missing? You haven't had very many. Alright. So we're gonna finish up this round and then we're gonna put them back up on the wall and do a quick recap of them. And then we're gonna talk about one more thing. And then we'll be kind of open to where we're gonna go from there.
Focus or. Nobody did it out loud. No, I know, but if you put it alone, it sounds like we would say. Yeah.
How we doing?
This is all stuff we should
Got anything? All right. Lovely. We're wrapping up. All right, are we done? You guys done? Excellent. All right, I got all the posters, so we're gonna come back together and we're gonna talk through what we found. Put these on the opposite side. So if I can have your attention back, let's I'm going to talk about 2 more things, and then we're going to have open discussion. So we got plenty of flexibility to continue conversations in just a minute. So in a minute, we're going to walk through the findings from our posters, but I want you to think about something while we're doing that. So I want to talk about grant programs, and that can stew in your brain while we talk about these other things. Changing it up, I'm over here now. So the grant that we currently have, I think I talked about. I'm going to go back over here just to keep you guys moving. I feel like I might have to cough. So the program that we have is through the Community Development Block Grant, and it fixes homes for low-income homeowners. That program also has funding for fixing up rental properties. Got a tickle. So one thing to know about these grants is what we would need to do to be ready for them. In order to be ready to go after a homeowner rehab grant, we did a study that analyzed the condition of homes in the entire town. I'm going to keep moving. Part of that study resulted in this map right here that has kind of condition ratings for all of the homes. This wasn't a complete structural analysis of every house. This was somebody driving by, seeing what they saw. But that is the first step to having an inventory that says, how many homes do you have that are obviously substandard? Combined with that, you have the question of how many low-income people you have. Those are 2 of the parameters. And then as part of that study, we did a survey where people could fill in that they were interested in that kind of help and what kind of issues their homes had. So because of that, we were able to go into that grant with a waiting list of about 30 people, but you have to have way more than you know you can do with the funds you applied for. So we applied for funds for 11 to 14 homes because we had this waiting list of 30 people. And that was the formula for being successful. The same thing applies for a rental program. There are definitely rental properties in the town that could use rehabbing. If we want to apply for funds to do that, we need some landlords to get together so that we have a list of maybe 15 or more rental units, not whole properties, but units that need that rehabilitation. And then we would kind of have what we need to apply. All of these top set of programs, they're all income based. So you have to make below median income to qualify for them.
So is it the landlord though, or the tenant?
The tenant. And with all of them, you know, that's the first part, to be able to use it. Sorry, geez. To be able to use it, it has to be serving a low-income person who lives there. And for both of them, it comes with a restriction going forward. Depending on how much money is put into the property, there will be a time period that unit has to stay being used by a low-income person. So for a rental property, for example, depending on how much money they put in, the landlord would have to agree to rent to an income qualified person for 5, 10, or 15 years, depending on the amount. Okay, so those are 2. It can be used for mobile home replacement programs. So this replaces rundown, especially old mobile homes that are on owned land. The low-income person living there has to own the land. It can't be in a mobile home park. There is also funding for down payment assistance programs, so that helps low-income people purchase homes. There's funding for down payment assistance with renovation money, because all of the homes that a low-income person could buy in Tompkins County require renovation to be even halfway passable. So that is a possibility. And there's also funding for rental assistance. You may have heard this called Section 8. They don't call it that anymore, but it's basically a voucher that goes to a renter. They have to find a landlord that will work with the program. By the way, if you're a landlord, it's illegal not to work with the program, but it is still a process that the renter goes and finds their own housing with that voucher. all of these things, there are other people applying for money that can be used here. If the neighborhood housing, they apply for this money and it can be used here. TC Community Action applies for money, it can be used here. There's some faith-based communities that apply for money and it can be used here. We applied for money because we could see that that wasn't enough and it wasn't getting directed exactly here. We were competing with other communities for that money. The county also sometimes goes after this money, but we thought it was important to do that direct money at our community on purpose. The nice thing about all of those programs is that they also come with money for managing the program. So our current program, I'm not managing it. I am doing some things. So there is some town work going on it, but we have a consultant and the grant pays the consultant to run the program. It works out very nicely. Yes.
Just for context, do you have any kind of a number of what percentage of the population is low income?
Ooh.
Can you repeat the question a little bit louder?
The question was, what percentage of Danby is low income? It's an excellent question because Danby is a relatively high income town in this area in general. Don't off the top of my head. It is in here if you want to skim for it. I think it's under number 5, or maybe number 4.
Well, the question is, what percentage of housing is rental versus?
Yes, so around 20% of Danby residents are renters, and that is also especially low for this county, and for New York as a whole. So I'm going to go through the other programs quickly to think about, and then we're going to talk about the posters and what we did. We just unsuccessfully, unfortunately, applied for Restore New York funds. Restore New York is a program that's focused on community centers, on hamlets, villages, sometimes downtowns, but mostly hamlets and villages. It's money for replacing, repairing, or demolishing buildings on Main Street. So we applied for money for the market with that parcel. I think we would be more successful if we had a broader palette of projects in our application. If we were applying for more money and for a slate of projects that together would really help the hamlet, I think that makes that more competitive. I will say we were one of the smaller. When I looked at the winners, there was only one winner in the region that had an ask as small as we did. And when I went and looked, like, what was that for funding? It was for fixing up a Main Street building for a nonprofit that served single mothers and their children and was going to build a playground for kids. So I was like, okay. Locally, we did, not Danby, but our community did get a fair amount of money for work at, what do they call it now? They used to call it Chainworks, the old MSA complex, Southworks. That's going to get some significant funding for one of its first phases. There are other various affordable housing development grants that can be applied for directly by an affordable housing developer or a person or an owner, but the town can also help with. There is a lot of money for infrastructure improvements. So that could be street-related things, but it could also be things like shared septic, shared sewer, shared water. And there are also grants for things like updating zoning, doing master planning for an area like this, for a community center, and comprehensive plan updates. We have an old comprehensive plan, I will say. It was originally from 2003. The zoning update is the biggest thing we've done to implement it, and we just kind of did that. So we will eventually need to think about comprehensive planning again. Whether or not right now is the time to do it, I'm not sure. So I want you to ruminate on those things because we're trying to figure out what we want to address with our grant writing consultant. And because we were talking about housing, I'm going to start back here. So you talked about what housing barriers or limits do we have in this community. And the first one is supply, and I think that's totally true. And this thing, something that sometimes can surprises people. They see, oh, we have some abandoned houses that aren't being used. We must have too many houses. The reality is, we have not built enough houses as a region as we needed in quite a long time, and there is a lot of pent-up supply, and that is why prices keep going up. Yes, they say, oh, we do not have pent-up supply, we have pent-up demand. Infrastructure, septic and water, that is a major barrier to getting more housing, and it's also a major barrier to affording the housing that we have, because when everybody is reliant on their own off-grid infrastructure, it's a huge lump sum cost that people don't think about for a long, long time, and then they have a $30,000 bill. And how do you pay that? When you're not, I pay $400 a quarter for drinking water, constantly paying for it all the time. But if you suddenly have to replace your well after not having paid anything for it for a long time, it can be a real barrier to remaining in your home and it being safe for you. Financial limits of landowners to develop. Does somebody want to say something about that? I'm not sure what it means. Oh, is that Crystal?
I mean, from personal experience, but also, I just imagine that like if there are folks along the hamlet who own houses and either they don't know how to upgrade so they can add a rental unit, or they don't know how to, or they want to subdivide to have.
It's an excellent point. Yeah. So I think what that gets at is there are people who have land and maybe even houses who would like to make them available, but it's expensive to do so. If someplace isn't in good condition, it's very hard just to maintain it at what really low income people can afford. It's amazing if someone can rent out a unit for $600 a month. There are a lot of people who need a $600 a month unit. That doesn't cover maintenance, and that's a long-term issue if there isn't subsidy involved. The cost of new builds, we talk about this a lot. The current cost of construction, new construction, is around $300 a square foot, very high. So a 1,000 square foot house could cost $300,000 to build. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The whole package, yeah. And 300 is, an average. So there are a lot of projects that cost 400. There aren't a lot of projects that cost much less than 300 right now. When you can have multiple units in one property, there's savings to be had there, so that helps. Investors needed. I think that is kind of connected to the landowner's financial situation. It is hard to find money. Does anyone want to say anything else about that? No? Yes?
I think there's a perception that Danby's really far away. I was going to invest in downtown.
Sure.
And, the first time after you got here a few times, you're here, right? And it's an easy drive, and so I think there's a perception that we're further away. Maybe we need some kind of slogan, Let's help the bill. Yeah. I don't know, something to start,
Yeah. I was just looking at our demographic analysis, and Danby over the hill might be a good one.
Nancy, years ago when White Hawk was being developed and Judy was working with a partner, she came up with the slogan that Danby's 5 degrees cooler.
Right.
So, I was just talking about this too with one of my good friends who lives over by South Hill School, and whenever I invite him over, he complains about the drive, and I probably tell him to shut up. But I told him it's 6 miles out. You can associate that with 6 Mile Creek, 6 miles out to Danby. It's not that far. That's what I tell him all the time. Yeah.
I used to live up on Genome Circle, on the Snyderville Road. And it was further for my daughter to get from that house to downtown than it is from here. Now, it was very handy for me when I worked for that. And so it was really great because I still had to be at work. But when she moved back, and Dum downtown, it was more traffic, it's much easier to build more safe at the Albany Street.
Albany Street Bridge is out right now, yeah.
For the next at least 6 months. So, and since she works on the border of Albany and Buffalo right now, it used to be Jewish, they were.
Yeah.
It's much easier, much nicer drive than 79.
Much drive, much easier. Well, this year.
I'll be right, if we build a Danby, people will come. There are people who are not deterred with us. By the distance, it's just it's not, we don't have.
But there needs to be reasons for them.
I think if there was.
I think what Colin's talking about is places for people to live.
I have
People will
clients,
fill.
I'm a realtor, I have clients now having shop in Canada, because one affordability, but, so they're not deterred to go that far away. You know, if we had something for them,
Ask them to drive slowly through town.
yeah. Yeah.
Especially because we're still city of it.
Yeah, anyway, that's just kind of one recent question. And with going back to investors, I won't be able to find anyone, it won't be easy to have higher rents.
That is definitely an issue for rents, is for rental properties. We don't have very much rental market for someone to compare to. We have such a low amount of renters in the town in general. It's hard to find comps, and we definitely don't have a lot of new rental for someone who wanted to build more to say, look, this, somebody can charge this amount there, I can charge the same amount, I can afford to build it. So the last one I see is NIMBY. Does anyone want to say what NIMBY means? Right, not in my backyard, over there.
It's a good idea, but not here.
Yes, so this is a very common thing that ruins a lot of potential housing, is just people who are upset about anything being built by them. There's also Banana, which is built nothing anywhere near anything, and that's people who are upset about things even though it's not near them. We got some of that too. So I see a hand.
I was wondering, like, there has historically been like tension in Danby about open space, green space. Has the new zoning kind of quelled some of that, because now it's just like, look, these are the new standards, or has it not been around long enough for the test waters?
Yeah, so one of the things, the new zoning, especially for the hamlet and for small scale development, does do a lot to combat this, because there's a lot of projects that are by right. So we decided this is a place that it's okay to build. If you build things that are on the list of things that are by right, there isn't an approval process other than you follow the building code and have the health and safety requirements that every building has to have. But there is no referendum on whether or not you can build a new house on the lot, a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex. All of those are by right in the hamlet. So if somebody wants to build them, they can come apply right for a building permit and move forward. We haven't had a lot of it yet. One of the interesting things that I'm learning as we see first projects, along with that kind of opening up of restrictions, we also impose some requirements, because we wanted to really make sure that when we're unleashing development, what we get is good and is in this hamlet form. And several of the first projects are having a hard time complying with some of the form requirements, especially the one that nothing that's come forward yet has complied with, and people have come for variances, or people have not started their projects yet because they're upset about it, we have a maximum setback. So part of creating a village environment is getting buildings close to the street, the way it is down here, where you feel like, oh, I'm in a place, this is a place for people. That's hard for people to do on a lot that hasn't had that before, and especially with the way the road is now, people don't really want to do that. So the very first project, which is 2 houses going all the way at the end, the second to the last lot in the hamlet on 96B, just past Michigan Hollow, is starting with 2 homes, and it will have more, a bakery and some other homes after that. They wanted to put the houses in the middle of the lot. There were some good reasons. There was existing infrastructure there. The last building on the lot had been there. They wanted to build it on the footprint of the old building. They had to get a variance, is what they got with. We have 2 other projects that haven't yet applied for variances, but probably will. And so it's kind of a question of does that rule really make sense? Should we look at least for a while, not having that requirement and see how things go? And also, from a lot of people I've talked to, I can tell you as a designer, it is a very important component of the end game. From the perspective of someone doing the first house, it's not that important for that first one or the second one. At the end, it is important if you want to create a certain environment on the street, you need to have more of that. But until we kind of get things rolling, it may not be the most important thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to add another barrier that I thought of.
Yeah.
That much of the area on 96 feet is in the flood zone.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so FEMA is about to adopt new flood maps. Buttermilk Creek runs right back here. That creek has never been mapped for flood maps before. It's now mapped. The new maps delineate areas that are in the 100-year flood zone, which is the one that is most restrictive. It requires you to have insurance on your property. That insurance is expensive. It has a process for any changes within the flood zone. So it's definitely an issue, particularly in this hamlet.
Where can you see the map for them?
Well, I could give you the URL, but it's very long. But send me an email, planner@danby.ny.gov, and I will send you a link. Certainly, there's been, so the question was, has it ever flooded? We do have areas that flood, especially big storms. Has all of what they're saying is the 100-year flood is that I have seen, I'm not really sure. There's not a lot of houses in it. I think when we did the analysis, there were 17, 12, less than 20 houses in the whole town in it. I can tell you, as a county, we're all getting new maps. And in the city of Ithaca, they're adding, I think, 500 houses, one of them being mine.
No.
Which is a really big deal. Whole neighborhoods, but in Danby, it's a little bit less, but it certainly is going to impact some people, which is why, as a town, we mailed a letter to every single person. FEMA was not going to notify every single person, but we did. We're going to move on to what has the Hamlet gained, because I really like the first one. Thank you for investing in planning and in planning. One of the things that I try to do, I'll just say, is bring in more money every year than my department spends. So far, that's going pretty well. So I think it's a good investment. Zoning, which is kind of implementing our shared understanding of what the future of the town should be, controlling what development happens and what's allowed. A summer market, that I think is one of the most exciting recent developments. Go and enjoy it, it's a lot of fun. Potential development of Dobson property. Who wrote that?
Yeah, who knows the truth?
Oh, do you know something about that I don't know?
Potential is the word.
Yes, now that the Dobson property isn't totally covered in junkyard, there is potential for it to be redeveloped. I've been working with the owner. We're working on it. I wouldn't say that we're anywhere near there yet. A jiu-jitsu studio, that's right. They left. Yeah, that was right. We did gain it, yes.
They outgrew it.
Yeah.
But the renovation of that space is huge.
Yeah. Too successful. The firehouse, yes. White Hawk Eco Village, absolutely. And still, what are you guys, halfway? Halfway there?
A little over halfway.
A little over halfway. When I moved here, there were 4 houses at White Hawk, and they approached me for help with marketing, and I was like, oh, this is going to be hard. They do it, it's very impressive. Dodson Park, disc golf, and the playground, and an ever-growing assortment of more things. The natural playground is really awesome. Yeah, so we definitely have some good stuff going, and we have more stuff coming, which I think is even more exciting.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
The 40-mile limit.
Town. Yeah.
That's something that needs to be 55. We would be great if we could get a meal passing somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. So that reminds me, I had a very interesting conversation with one of our local elected leaders, and I won't say who, but I worked on this goes back to your question about my experience with hamlets and villages. I was one of the designers of what will be a village, and the design has changed since then, but in the early stages at King Road on 96B in the town of Ithaca, not in Danby, can't do anything about it. But there's work to develop a walkable, transit-served village just this side of Ithaca College. And we had this conversation about speed limit. So right now, the speed limit through there is 50, I believe. I think it's safe to say most of us drive 60. We were talking about a quarter-mile radius, which is the distance that most people can walk in 5 minutes. It's generally considered what you would want a real hamlet to be. Our hamlet zoning is much bigger, but so you could have a complete compact connected neighborhood in a quarter-mile radius circle, which we designed there. And we wanted to lower the speed limit to 30 miles for 1/2 mile on 96B. We have somebody who lives out here say, excuse me, I drive to Ithaca every day. You're going to slow me down. That's going to hurt my commute. And we were talking about, making a place for children from the school to cross the street to access the natural places, making it safe for everybody, blah, blah, blah. They said, whatever, you're slowing me down for 1/2 mile from 60 to 30 miles an hour. Who can do the math and know how much time that adds to your drive, going from 60 to 30 for 1/2 mile?
Well, just the 60 to 30 is disadvantageous. It's all the traffic you create by going from 60 to 30, people slamming, accidents, all that stuff.
So, but let's say just
seconds, milliseconds, probably.
So it's exactly 30 seconds because for 1/2 mile.
But you gotta remember, one complaint, there are a bunch of other people thinking it, and you guys haven't tried it. It is a high accident area. For some reason, that crossroad in front of the hotel, we come across them as they happen. And there's something happens when you come up over to that stoplight.
Yeah.
So, yes, it should probably be slower, but 30 is pretty damn slow.
Yes, but it's not. It feels very slow when it's through the middle of nowhere because you have nothing that you're going through. But in my neighborhood, if you drive 30, you're going to feel like an insane kamikaze. So when you have a place, it doesn't feel crazy to drive 30, and it definitely doesn't feel crazy to do it for 1/2 mile and take you 30 seconds more than driving 60 miles an hour.
It's really raising the same issue as that maximum setback at the end of the end. So the first 30-mile-an-hour zone is going to stand out sort of thumb. That's growing organically from the city of Ithaca outwards, it'll be natural.
So what has the hamlet lost? And I think this is a great list. I added some of the things to the list earlier, but in people's current experience and lifetime here, we have lost a hardware store, a gas station, a general store, a school, a deli, an ice cream store, more activities at Jennings Pond, and a post office. So in recent memory, all of these things were available here. There's no reason that we can't have them again if we work together and make them successful. Some of these things closed because of the market. They weren't successful and went out of business. A lot of them closed because the person who owned them retired and there wasn't someone to take them back on. It's very hard to transition small businesses. And so sometimes things just get lost because that person who had the drive to do it isn't here anymore and there wasn't someone else to pick it up. So what is missing? Things that you wanted to see. Commercial activity, absolutely, we lost. It's right here, we lost it all. Or most of it. Evening transportation to and from Ithaca. Yeah, I think we got 5 buses a day. Like I said, that is amazing, unbelievable for this density of a community, but it is not enough to rely on for most people for most of their trips. Community gathering space. This one's working out well tonight, but we can't use it all the time. We definitely hear all the time that people want more places to get together, especially in the heart of the community here. Affordable housing, and I think we're getting less and less of that all the time as prices go up. Transportation in general, a focus or an identity, I hear from people a lot that they don't feel like we have a good identity or that they feel like we have a negative identity. And there's a lot of people who are down on Danby, and this is kind of on us as a community to say what's unique about us, what's important about us, and how we're going to talk about our community in a way that makes us proud or hurts us. That's totally up to us to decide. And a slogan. That's interesting because I was just at visiting a place that has an amazing slogan that I don't think applies to Danby, but it does encapsulate that community's vision of itself and helps it transition forward. And that's Geneva. Their slogan is uniquely urban. That tells you exactly what they want to be, exactly what they value. That's what they are. They are an urban place at the north end of the lake. It's a small town or a small city, but they have embraced that image of themselves, and that can percolate other parts of their work, which I think is really great. So that is something that we can work on together. Now we've gone through some of our feelings about this place and what we've had and what we lost, and what barriers we have. What thoughts do we have about how should we take this money that we have right now and work with a grant maker? What issues can we address or do you think are most important? And I will say, before we jump into that conversation, the easiest thing would be, we could do more homeowner rehab. If we currently have 19 applications for our 11 to 14 slots. If we got 15 more, we'd be ready to go for another round of that program. And we can apply for it every year. Each program is 2 years or 2.5 years, but we can keep going. But does anybody feel like there's other things on here that they think are more important? Leslie?
I can't see it.
You can't see it.
But, along sort of along the rehab for houses, is it every once in a while there are grants for rehabbing barns? We've got some barns in the hamlet that really use help quickly.
Let me. Got some blank wall over here. So I'm going to use this as we talk about things that we think are worthy of pursuing outside funding for. And some of these, not only do we have available programs, but we could also do work with local foundations or other funders. There's nothing that we definitely couldn't fund. Some things are harder than others, but okay, barn restoration. Trails. Nancy, yeah?
Yeah, is there money available to pay someone to have a community center? Or is it just money to build a community center?
So Nancy's question is there money for a community center? A community center is something that has been on Danby's list for a hamlet. Gosh, I think I was just pulling this up. I think this is 1989's Danby plan. What is it? Recommendations for the future, 1989. In here, Danby needs a community center. You could look at this, and you could look at this, and you could look at our CAL plan, and you could look at the plan from 1967, and they all say most of the same things about what people want for the hamlet and the community as a whole. More stuff for old people to do, more stuff for young people to do, more housing, more community gathering spaces. All of those things have been long-term goals, but they'll happen when we can work together on them and have some energy there.
Well, there was talk about building a community center together in Danby Park, or
Yes.
Dobson Park.
So when Dobson Park was created, it was land that was given to the town. The town didn't want to own it, but did put a conservation easement on it that reserved some land for a community center. That land turned out to be pretty darn wet and hard to build a community center on. A lot of grants that are for construction funding specifically don't fund construction of municipally owned buildings. That's one of the harder things to fund. There are some programs that do it. It would definitely also take a strong community fundraising effort to build a community center. And the most difficult part about a community center is actually not building it, it's maintaining it and having the funds to do that.
Internet or broadband, like the Tioga County or what right is doing with fiber, independent ISP.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of these things that we lost, being businesses where people left or retired and didn't have a replacement. Would it be oversimplifying things to have like almost a matchmaker service where we're identifying businesses that think they'll be done in the next 10 years and then identifying people who might want to come in and take those over so that we don't lose assets we already have?
Yeah, you know, it's a whole industry. So I say this as someone who has closed without selling 3 small businesses. And we did try to do it, and it is very hard. There are people who help with that, of selling their businesses. Especially for small businesses, it's really hard because let's say you own an ice cream shop, a small ice cream shop, and you invested $500,000 in it, and you've run it for years, and it's kind of broken even, and you're ready to sell, and you say, oh, it's worth $500,000, and I would like to open an ice cream shop. I could buy it. I could buy the business from you for $500,000, or I could wait until you close and get your stuff at a discount and open my own ice cream shop, 2 parcels down, or half that, or, I'm not poo-pooing the idea. I think it's great and we should try. We don't have a lot of businesses left to matchmake for, but I do think kind of that work of, as a community, staying on top of that and wanting to reinvest, especially because I'll say we have 3 people working on opening small businesses in the hamlet right now that will, I think it's safe to say, be open in the next 2 years. And it's a really hard thing to do. And the more we can support them when they're in business, that's great, but also having people sitting on top of when that investment's created, can we keep it going is really important.
But to that thought, what about for like homeowners in the hamlet that could subdivide to match the developers that will? I mean, could there be like almost a bulletin board, like communication? Because I don't know if all the homeowners in the hamlet, especially ones that are struggling to maintain their properties, if they know that they could use it.
That is something that I would really hope can come from this is, right, we have 5 people here tonight who live in the hamlet, but as we connect with more of them, then we can have a list of people who say, I have space, I'd like to see something happen, I don't have resources, but if somebody else does and they're looking for space, I put my name on the list.
Just going back to something you said earlier, it occurred to me, is there a difference in the proportion of rental housing townwide versus in the hamlet?
Probably, I think, I know of a fair number. It's really scattered. There's a few places where, somebody has done a few lots of all rental together, but there's a fair amount of rental units in the hamlet. Yeah, I'd say there's various clusters in the hamlet. It's definitely one of them.
Maybe I was just going to add into that whole concept, maybe working with Tompkins County Economic Development to let, people who are wanting to open businesses in the county to know, to let people in Danby know if they're interested in opening something, and then see if there's some kind of match.
Sure, absolutely. And I will say that when we're talking about businesses, there are communities that set up revolving loan funds. Usually that takes some investment, either from a foundation. There used to be grants, so it used to be that any of these housing programs with federal housing dollars, you could, for example, do homeowner rehab, you give people money, but make it a loan and they pay you back over time, and then you take that money and then you can loan it to somebody else. The state stopped that a few years ago. I happened to be the housing planner for the county at the time, and it was a huge mess. We had to sell all of our portfolio, and luckily we had a willing buyer, INHS, and we sold things to them for a very low dollar amount, but now the way that kind of system works is if you loan out money and you get it back, every month you have to report to New York State how much money you got back and you have to give it to them immediately. It's a huge hassle. So now it's so much easier to just give people money. Take it, don't give it back. They do still come with restrictions. If you don't stay in a house for more than a certain amount of time and you sell it, you can't get the money, fix up your house and sell it next year and get a windfall. You have to give the money back in that case when it sells. Cindy, oh, John. Olivia.
Well, I was just gonna say, obviously, rental property rehab is big.
Rental rehab. Does anyone else in the room own rentals in either the hamlet or even just the town? Would you folks be interested in part of a rehab program? You don't have to decide now, but
5 years ago.
yeah.
Yeah. Mine is pretty good.
Yeah.
Except for one that has to be here.
Yeah. So, Olivia, I know you have, what, 6? Five? Yeah. All right, any other, John?
I think what I'm kind of reaching for is what does the hamlet want to look like? What's the vision for what our hamlet looks like? Particularly if I were starting a business here, I want to kind of have a sense of what people's thinking is around, does it look like Trumansburg? Does it look like Brookendale Market and Clare Victory, or anything ever in between? And I don't know whether that's a charrette or a community visioning process.
I think it's a really difficult thing because, so I've been involved in a lot of design charrettes for places where one landowner owns 100 acres and you can design what it's going to look like. We have hundreds of owners and what it's going to look like is transitional for a long time. And we could design something for Olivia's parcel and we could do a lot there with the limitations of infrastructure and funding. But having a critical mass of places that are interested in that, we could hire a designer who could take our zoning and do a drawing of full build out in a bunch of ways, but most people aren't going to do anything on their parcels. And that's what saying, what is it going to look like in any kind of short time span is difficult. It's going to be evolving probably slowly as we move forward.
We did talk about this though in the course of the rezoning process. And we do have commercial design standards, which are supposed to guide, new construction. And there was a good discussion with the planning board especially about, somebody comes before the planning board with an idea for a commercial building, it's nice to have some sort of community standard for what we want it to look like. And we do have that, thanks to Jason Perrin, who was our excellent planner before our excellent planner.
Yeah, and the short answer is, it looks like a hammer. So that's what a lot of those design kind of guidelines are, is it has the characteristics of places like Varna and Brookendale and Trumansburg. Almost every community center in the United States that was built before cars has a lot of similar themes. And those are the things that are baked into those design guidelines. But as to how it lands on the ground, it's going to be a parcel at a time forward. So we are about 35 minutes over time, and I'm happy to continue, stay, and have more conversation. But I do want to say that we've covered a lot, and I think it's really great. And some people are probably going to start thinking about leaving, and if not thinking about leaving, maybe thinking about the coffee that I have over there. Yeah.
Can you add infrastructure, please?
Yeah.
And then landscaping, or not land, but streetscape.
I can see Danby having, like, how they have, what is it in the city, there's something for grade, where there's like a farms for gardeners. I
The
can see
beautification.
Danby doing that, that's my understanding as well, as everything. We have
Yeah.
that gardeners, figure it out. I would put that on my ready to do, I was going to
Yeah, so it's the CCE beautification,
Okay.
so it is countywide, and they do also have grants. Yeah.
But I mean, you saw how much people were able to dig out of their gardens to shape it. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if anybody wants to volunteer, I've been trying to put flowers in the welcome Danby in front of the sign. Did it last summer, and the tools I put in, and if somebody wants to take over for the summer plantings and
So that one?
No,
This
right
one?
here. Right, there's another one, but the tools are gone, and I'm starting to think about what to put there, and I really don't know.
I think we've had a few things where people have kind of met someone in the community and had a good idea and said, I want to keep working on this. What can really make ongoing efforts successful? Nothing alone is going to come out of tonight, except I have a little more guidance on what to tell our grant makers. But what will happen is if people in this room and more people keep getting together and talking and working and doing some of the what are you ready to do things. And that's how this kind of a movement becomes successful. So what I am going to do is put this what are you ready to do list over here and this new blank piece. And as we can kind of chat with each other a little bit more and mill around, if you want to be a doer in the Hamlet and continue working towards getting together again with more people, coming and doing some of these things, coming up with more things to do, inviting other people in, you can put your email on here so that we'll share it with all of the other people who are ready to be doers and ready to get involved there. And we can make this something that we come back to again, I don't know, maybe in a month, maybe sooner. But it can be an email list that we can share and keep working together. Yeah.
What was the overlap you saw from tonight's conversations with yesterday's?
Whew.
Did you have a whole separate group?
We had a separate group in West Danby. What to say about it? The most actionable item that came out of that meeting is people on Valley View Road would appreciate less plowing. It was a very negative meeting. It didn't go very well, and it wasn't very productive. So there isn't a lot of overlap, unfortunately. Actually, one piece of overlap is that I did mention people really didn't like some of the design requirements for hamlets and would prefer a little more freedom there. And that may be something we discussed with the town board of, you know, we have the things that allow what we want, and maybe we don't need to have as many requirements of forcing people to do exactly that on day one. But that's a discussion I think that maybe we'll continue to have.
They don't want to lower the ceiling.
They do not. Yeah, there was broad consensus that 3496 will never be comfortable, safe. No one should bother trying. Any attempt to do so is completely wasted. Anyone who says it could be better is insane. Yeah. Which is like,
That's why you don't live in West End.
and all of this, my response is this is your community, it's not mine. I can tell you what can happen if you wanted to, and I can help you get there. You're free to disagree with me, but I do know a few things. So I can tell you if something can happen, but nothing's going to happen if you don't get involved in it.
Did the traffic calming on there?
Yeah.
It's been interesting, but I need some.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you. So, yes.
And traffic calming, not only in the Hamlet, but on the other roads.
Yeah, so one of the things that I did do last night, and it's worth knowing, is the broad array of things that planning office is working on, which one of them is we are engaged in an intermunicipal traffic safety study program. So municipalities around the county got together and put in for a huge grant to hire a really good engineering firm to municipality by municipality, look at all the crash statistics, meet with kind of representatives in those communities and see where people know it's dangerous and make recommendations. It's called Safe Streets for All. It's a federal program, but we got a huge amount of money to do this specific looking at Danby. They're going to look at all roads, and it's from the perspective of all road users. So it does prioritize what we call the most vulnerable road users, which is people who are traveling outside of single occupancy vehicles. But it's about everything. It's about people driving, it's about people walking, it's about people biking, it's about people on buses. So we're going to be looking broadly. And one of the things that's interesting is a lot of the places that people say we should really work on road safety in Danby are state roads or county roads. And the great thing is state DOT and county highways are involved in that project as well. So it'll be a chance for us to tell them, these are problems in our community that we want to prioritize.
And we do have this, the highway department is helping, the state says only give us 3 roads at a time. So we submit for 3 roads, and now there is a list of 3 roads, 4 or 5 roads actually, that we're waiting to hear back from the state as to whether we can lower the speed.
Well, ours was lowered, but people are not slow.
Yeah, a sign does almost nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think 6 in the road.
6 in the road?
6 in the road.
We're not talking about neighbors.
So Leslie, are we still able to, I mean, I assume you have Miller Road on there.
All right, so I think that we can kind of mill around, have conversations. I want to call this the end of our organized conversation. I want to thank you all for being here. I'll remind you, if you want to get on the list of people who want to continue connecting because they want to do things in the Hamlet, you can email me. I will work on that. But if you want to guarantee you're on that list, you can put it on here. That would be very helpful.